So, fabulous edition of the Jim Dandy on Saturday at Saratoga. 6-horse field, but stacked from top to bottom. And it was a great stretch run between Fierceness and Sierra Leone. And it was great to see Fierceness step back up, run his race, prove that 2-year-old champion form again, because he's been a bit of an in-and-outer. And I got to say, it was great to see Mike Rapoli and his team celebrating so much in the boxes. You know, you can say what you want about Mike, but the enthusiasm that he has for the game is undeniable. And I love that, you know, he's won some of the biggest races in the world. Jim Dandy's obviously a big race, but not as big as some of the other races he's won. And he still celebrates like it's the Kentucky Derby or like it's the Breeders' Cup Classic. And I'm sure I think it was a really vindicating win for him and for Todd Pletcher, because Fierceness had gotten some criticism from, you know, among other sources, this show, for being a little faint-hearted, a little gutless. And I think that was what was so great about the ride that Johnny Velasquez had aboard him, was he took him out on purpose, turning for home, basically said, Sierra Leone, if you're going to come get me, you got to come up the inside, which is harder to close on the inside than outside of horses. It was great to see him back. Sierra Leone, again, ran a great race, but again, leaves himself too much to do. The Travers, John, is stacking up like a monster race. Torpedo Anna, potentially Fierceness, Sierra Leone, Mindframe, Dornock, Unmatched Wisdom. Like, these are really, really nice 3-year-old horses. And I'll make a broader point about the 3-year-old crop in a minute. But what was your takeaway from the Jim Dandy?
Well, it was typical Fierceness being Fierceness. It was, when he's on his game, he's one of the best horses of his crop. And when he's not, he's not. He runs numbers that basically would be lucky to win an A, other than in the winter of New York. But in his pattern, this was the on again, off again, on again, off again, on again Fierceness. And he ran a 103 buyer and really looked like a dominant 3-year-old. Again, he's only run half a dozen, now 7 times. So his career is still unwritten as far as what else he'll be doing down the road. He champion 2-year-old. Inconsistency has riddled his performance. But Joe, I agree with what you're saying, because not only about Mike has the enthusiasm of a fan and shows it. And definitely gets excited when horses run well, and he's running a bunch of races. And the Jim Dandy, even though it's a grade 2, it is an important race in New York racing landscape. And knowing, Mike growing up in as a fan of New York racing, this I'm sure was really super important. The other thing is, you got to remember, this is a homebred of theirs. So it's not just a horse that they purchased and is, competing in grade 1 and grade 2s and the toughest races for straight 3-year-olds so far this calendar year. But it's the fact that he actually bred the horse adds a little bit additional of excitement, pride of ownership. And I can tell you, if you own a horse and you're competing in those races and win, that's one thing. When you're a breeder of it, it's even better. So I can't imagine having a horse of this caliber winning these kind of races as a homebred. Sierra Leone also ran a typical Sierra Leone race, which was he was out of it until he wasn't, came storming back. And then, unlike previous times where he's been the antagonist literally going after a horse that's in front of him, Batten Down actually pinned him to the rail. Batten Down was the one who was coming down and being hit right-handed by Junior Alvarado, to the point where he was pinning Sierra Leone against the rail. Some would say that caused Sierra Leone, to miss a beat and to pause and maybe not have his momentum going forward all the way. I don't think it mattered. I think the way that Johnny V, who now has ridden this horse Fierceness 5 times and understands his quirkiness, I think he did the right thing and had him going down the middle of the racetrack and basically gave himself a wide berth to show that the horse was the best. I was a little disappointed with Seize the Gray. This is the second straight race that he has not shown up after his Preakness win. But that's the 3-year-old year. The 3-year-old calendar is you're going against the best horses of your generation. And that horse has run a dozen times already, which is a bit much for a 3-year-old, even in the Lucas camp.
Yeah, no doubt. And it was just one of those things where as soon as you saw how far off the pace he was, you figured like he was not going to run his race. So he's had a great campaign. Might need a little bit of a break. But we talked about it. It was a thrilling Triple Crown season, and it has seamlessly moved into a thrilling summer with the Haskell and the Jim Dandy so far, and the Travers shaping up to be a phenomenal race. And that's the point I want to make is, hear me now and hear me good. Like, this is a very, very nice 3-year-old crop. Like, there really, honestly, is nothing else you can set your watch to in racing quite like people complaining about the weakness of the 3-year-old colts after the Triple Crown. Like, it happens every single year. You could resurrect Secretariat, Seattle Slew, Affirmed, and you'd still have the same chorus of whiny bitches, excuse my language, Len, talking all summer about how mediocre the 3-year-old class is. And I'm over it. Like, and it stops now. This is a good group of 3-year-olds, competitive, talented, classy, good looking, everything you could want. And does it have any Hall of Famers? Maybe, maybe not. You know, the time will tell. But the fact that the 2-year-old champion who won a grade 1 earlier this year by 13 and a half lengths had to win the Jim Dandy to prove himself among his class, I think tells you all you need to know about the strength of this 3-year-old crop. So please, like, for the first year ever, can we appreciate this class of sophomores, fillies included?
Well, and Joe, and just to add to your point, look at this upcoming weekend's racing with the Saratoga Derby, the grade 1, and the test for 3-year-old fillies, you know, also a grade 1. There are some really solid, salty horses in both those races. Again, 3-year-olds. So maybe not even so much that the 3-year-olds that are running, you know, 2 turns on the dirt that are good, which you mentioned, you know, they had so many individual grade 1 winners in that 3-year-old crop. But just look at the turf racing and the female sprint racing. And again, you can come up with a few more horses that are definitely worthy of talking about how solid and how wonderful. And quite frankly, you know, how much I would like to have 1 or 2 of them in my barn. And, you know, I'm sure you guys would feel the same. But yeah, this 3-year-old crop is really salty, at least at the top end. There's a lot of good ones.
You know, I always think about this, especially in years when the older male division isn't that strong. And we're going to talk about the Whitney, which is, you know, stacked race relative to what's out there in the older dirt male division, 12 horses in there. But I always wish there was like a future bet you could make, like just either a 3-year-old or an older horse to win the Classic. Because I feel like most years you would get pretty good odds on the 3-year-olds. This year I would be heavy betting a 3-year-old would win the Classic. There's a couple other horses over the weekend that we want to talk about. How about the Chosen Vron? Like, one of the coolest horses in racing. I think he's right up there with Next and maybe a few other select horses. Ran a 105 buyer, winning the Bing Crosby for the 2nd straight year. He's just a horse that shows up every time. Cal-bred, obviously, by Vronsky. And what is he, like 19 for 24 now in his career? I mean, he's just a machine and really, really one of the horses to admire out there in California. Silver Knot romping in the Bowling Green. That was a really impressive race because they set some pretty fast fractions considering they were going a mile and 3/8, and we had Ohana Honor in the race. And I thought Kendrick did the right thing. Like, he kind of went after him early to try to win the race because God knows we see enough turf races in New York where everyone's riding for second and just let somebody crawl in the lead. Kendrick went for it. Didn't turn out too well, but that's just because Silver Knot is so good. And yet another Charlie Appleby monster. Nakatomi won the Alfred G. Vanderbilt handicap. Another really, really nice race. Ran with a 105 buyer for Wesley Ward. And I got to give a shout out to my favorite filly. I know I'm not supposed to have favorites, but she's my favorite filly in the West Point stable, in the West Point universe. Don't Look Back at All, getting her first graded stakes win in the Caress on Thursday. Patty, I'm going to send you some video of the West Point partners celebrating, watching the race. It's awesome. It's everything that you could possibly want to be if you start to get involved in horses, to have that feeling, to be rooting amongst all your friends and your coworkers and your family for a horse that just tries hard every time. She's run first 6 times, second 5 times in 13 career races. Pennsylvania bred by Peace and Justice, the definition of an overachiever, and she richly, richly deserved that win. I was so happy to see it. And, you know, she got a 94 buyer, so she's not far off what some of the top Philly turf sprinters are running. So mega shout out to the Clement team and to Don't Look Back at All, who's just as solid as they come. John, what else stood out to you from the rest of the racing this weekend?
Well, Silver Knot, you know, so impressive. I believe, if I remember correctly, he broke the track record, didn't he? As fast as he was going. You know, which, again, you say, well, mile and 3/8, they don't run that race too often. Doesn't matter. They've run it for years and years and years and years. And this horse, you know, broke the track record doing it. And doing so. 5-horse field. It was a little bit disappointing that it was scratched down to that, but that's racing. You can only beat the horses that are in the race. And Charlie Appleby just comes here loaded for bear. I mean, if you you overlook one of his horses running here, shame on you, because you almost have to give them a little bit extra oomph when when you're trying to make your decision on your pick 4, pick 5 pools. Dr. Venkman, another horse that I really like the name of, aside from the Chosen Vron, which I think is a really cute name. Dr. Venkman wins the Grade 2 San Diego Handicap, which I thought was a pretty impressive race. A Go Sapper gelding that can show early fractions and good speed. That's an unusual thing that you see. You don't see too many Go Sappers that can go out and burn the racetrack up the way that he did. I thought that was a really nice victory and a good win. And I think that was pretty much it. You nailed the other ones, Joe, as far as what other racing. America's Vow won in a really weird race on over the weekend at Saratoga. It's not necessarily headline material because it was basically an A other than, but it was what happened right before they sprung the latch. A horse, broke through the gate, regulatory risk, broke through the gate, literally like a nano fraction ahead of when they sprung the latch, and wiped out the 3 and the 2. The 3 standout sensation was held by the starter because nobody really knew what was going on. And then, this 44-1 shot, America's Vow, went out and just went 24-2, 49, 114, slowed the pace way down. I think everyone was kind of looking around going, what's going on? Like, is this really a race? Are they going to call it, a non-starting race? And at the end, they ended up saying that the 3 was a non-starter. The bets were refunded. The 4 was DQ'd and called unplaced, which I hadn't heard before of an actual standing, but was unplaced. But Joe, you're a bettor. I'm not. What can NYRA do, or what can the racing offices do when it comes to a situation like this, where a horse all of a sudden becomes a non-starter and then your monies get put on the favorite? Like, is there anything else that they can do that would be a better option? Because they can't stop the race at that point.
Yeah, it's a good question, and there's been some snafus at NYRA that we're going to get to in a little bit so far this year. This one, it didn't seem like this was anybody's fault. Just the horse happened to break through the gate at the wrong time. And yeah, I don't know what else you can do. Like, it was the right call to make the 3 a non-starter because he had no chance. I just feel bad for the connections who trained the horse up to the race, entered the horse in the race. If it betters, you at least get your money back. And then the only other thing they could do was declare the race a non-wagering contest, or just, kind of make it a null and void race. But if I bet America's Vow at 44-1, and I could never bet that horse, I wouldn't bet that horse with Monopoly money. But if I had that horse at 44-1, and you say the race doesn't count, I would have been pretty pissed off. So I think they, relatively speaking, they handled it about as well as they could.